right, welcome to part 2 of my series on how to craft a message. In this series, we're going to be covering how I personally go about crafting messages for either Sunday morning sermons or for Wednesday nights at youth group. Talked a little bit last week about how, knowing your audience is important when you're crafting a message, whether it's for fine arts, you're going to craft a certain way, or if you're crafting a message for speaking at youth group, if you're sharing a testimony, if you are speaking to your family, or if you're standing up and presenting at your school. In all of these instances, you're going to prepare differently, knowing your audience. Now, one of the tools that I'm giving you, you could really use in any one of those situations, even if you're just having a conversation with a family member and you're trying to convince them of something or trying to share something important with them. Obviously, there's a lot more listening involved in that, but if you have a chance to speak and present the gospel out on the streets or wherever, it's really important to know your heart and how you're going to go about that. So here we go with part 2. Part 2 is going to be about the roadmap. At this point, you should have the point of your message from last week. You should have a big brainstorm of a bunch of information that you've pieced together and that you want to use for your message. So with all of that now, how are we going to get it organized? If you're taking notes, I want you to write this part down because it's going to seem a little bit weird. We're going to write 5 words down. The first is me, we, God, you, we. Me, we, God, you, we. It might sound a little weird, but this is literally how I prepare my messages. It's something I adapted from Stanley. Gosh, maybe 13 years ago now. 13, 14 years ago. Anyways, it's a way that he explained to do messages, and it's something that I followed. So, you start off with me. Sometimes I will honestly start off with what I call an intro. If I'm speaking on a Sunday morning at a church I've never spoken at, I want to thank the pastor and thank the people that are there and introduce myself and have a little bit of an introduction before I get into my message. It's just sometimes I put reminders, if I'm going to thank specific people or if I want to comment on something that really doesn't have to do with my message but is just there, I put it in a separate introduction spot. Now, when I start my message, though, I said me. Now, I'm going to walk you through this. When you're presenting, sometimes it's really easy, okay? And it works really well to start with something personal. Maybe you're talking about pride and you're going to share about a time when you experienced pride. Now, if this thing is relatable, you can very easily walk from your me to your we. You could say, hey, this is something I dealt with. Now, don't we all deal with this? And maybe you give an example to kind of get your audience to buy in. You shared something personal and vulnerable about yourself. Or maybe the me section is more of a story about something. Now you're getting everybody in your audience to relate to that thing and kind of get tied in. You go from me to we. For me personally, the me section can be small or sometimes a little bit longer, but the we section is always pretty short. It's just kind of me explaining the thing that I felt and saying, don't we all feel this? But you can walk through that in a way that really draws people in. You go from me to we to God. What does God have to say about this? A lot of times I won't bring the scriptures in unless I'm opening up with a scripture until I've walked through the me and the we. Now your me, we could last all of 30 or 40 seconds, or you could share quite a bit and spend some time on that. It all depends on the constraints of your message and how long you're expected to speak. You go from me to we to God. When you get to God, for me, God is always one of the longest portions. What does God have to say on this topic? What is your point? If your point is that pride is bad, okay, super simple. You could talk about pride in your life, how it affected you badly. You can do it so in a way that's like, hey, we all do these things at time to time. We all have pride and pride affects us badly. And then you could go from that into your, what does God have to say about pride? And here, you could talk about Lucifer falling from heaven, pride. There's so many examples of where the pride of man got in the way of what God wanted to do. I'm not going to go into all of them, but you can find them and you can see in the Proverbs what God says blatantly about pride. Pride comes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. Those are things that you could support in that whole section. Again, driving home your one point, coming back to your one point over and over again. From the God portion, we go to you. Now, this is a part where I think specifically in preaching messages to people about God's truth, there has to be a stimulated response. We want people to respond to messages. So if pride is bad, your response should be humble yourselves and pray before God humbles you. Humble yourself so that you don't have to experience these bad things. That is the you portion of your message. And then I like to end with we, and the we is, okay, let's do this together. We're all here together. It's kind of like an encouraging, kind of like the cherry on top of your message. So we have me, we, God, you, we. The important thing in all of these is if you can define them and have transitional statements prepared. Because I'm telling you, when people are locked in, listening to you, it's really easy for you to kind of go, ma, 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 and just keep going with your message, and you lose the audience. And they're either scrolling on something or they're just not paying attention. And then all of a sudden you start saying something and they're like, oh, what? Wait, like what's going on here? And you've lost them. Having really good transitional statements is getting your audience locked in again. So you're talking about yourself, you're sharing your testimony. You could really easily gloss over, and all of a sudden you're talking about scripture and nobody's with you anymore. They're like, wait, wasn't he just telling a story and now he's sharing this thing about the scriptures? Those transitional statements are what's going to help you. And this is, I want you to write them down. Like you have your me, you're going to I'm going to share this little testimony about this and this. Transitional statement, write out a sentence that says, I know I struggled with this a lot, but don't we all struggle with this sometimes? Now you're going into your we portion. Share a little bit about how we all struggle in it. And then this is super simple, but again, have it written out. We struggle with this, and God has something really specific he wants to say to us today about this topic. Breathe. Boom, launch into your God section. Having those periods and those breakups in your message is really going to help people who they want to engage. They want to hear what you have to say, but naturally we just get distracted. So having those transitional statements is going to help you to move from section to section. So when I write out a message, this is what I do on my little note app. Title of my message, what's the point of my message? And then I put brackets. I say intro, me, we, God, you, we, and I have all of that listed right out so that I can start to plug my brainstorm. Okay, this is testimony, this is testimony, this is testimony, but I think I want to use this testimony in the you portion. I want to use this testimony to kind of push that portion of my message. Here's all my scriptures. This one's more of an encouraging thing that I want to use in my intro. These scriptures, this is the bulk of my message. I'm going to read these 10 verses out of this book, and this is really going to hit home. This is my God portion. Here's a supporting scripture. I'll plug that in here. Here's another encouraging one. I'm going to throw that one at the very end of my message, right as I'm about to do an altar call and have people respond. Your intro could include prayer, an opening prayer. You could put that as an intro before you even start. You start to plug all of that stuff. And what do you want to be in that opening prayer? Like, how do you want to open up in prayer? Figuring all that sort of stuff out, you start to plug it into your outline, and then you have to write in all of those transitional statements. And for you guys who are doing this, maybe for your first time, or you're just giving this a shot, this is how I do it. You don't have to do it this way, but try it. If it helps you, great. If you adopt certain parts of it, great. If not, whatever. But what I would encourage you to do is you've written out your main point. You've got your little outline started with me, we, God, you, we. And now I want you to put in a spot for transitional statement from me to we, transitional statement from we to God, and so forth. Write down the message. And I want you to verbatim write those ones out. You might be somebody who wants to read your message from your notes, or you might be somebody who just looks at an outline and is like, yeah, I know what I want to talk about. Either way, I want those transitional statements. Those are the things that are really going to take your message and encapsulate it in a way that your audience is going to be able to understand it. So that's your homework, working on those things. I hope this message encouraged you, and I hope you're excited for next week. We're going to be talking about using Canva, creating slides, other illustrations that you might use, and I hope you're enjoying this. God bless.